Coming up on a minute remaining. Rockets by 1. Shot clock to 5. Paul guarded by Cook. Paul on the spin. Rebound Green. 50 seconds to go. Here's Draymond Green giving it out to Quinn Cook for 3.
Chris Paul is down. Chris Paul is hurt. He's not going to come out the game. He did not pass half court on that last play, knowing it was a desperation play. He is hurt.
Hart, played by Thompson. 7 on the shot clock. This is Hart. Again, he's off. And the ball is knocked out of bounds. Last touch by the Warriors.
They're going to have to take Chris Paul off of the court. Well, they might have to drag him because you know he's not going to come off the court. But he is hurt right now, limping, walking gingerly and slowly to the sideline. Again, look at the play on the other half of the court. This is the most important play of the game because Golden State can take the lead with 40 seconds left. You know Chris Paul has to be agonizing in pain right now in order for him not to get back on defense.
And it looks like it's the hamstring as well, the way he's holding it. Oh, man.
The head athletic trainer for the Rockets, Keith Jones, over to have a conversation with Chris Paul.
And when there's no contact, as you know, Reg, sometimes those can be some of the scariest injuries for us players when you go up and you hurt yourself and it was no contact.
Looked like his compression shorts kind of ripped as well.
However, it is Houston ball with 20.
While Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards of all time, that clip you just saw was the furthest he's ever made it in the playoffs in his entire career. Although the Rockets ended up winning Game 5 and taking a 3-2 lead, the tables were turned because they were without Chris Paul for the rest of the series. The Warriors easily took Games 6 and 7 and ended up going to the finals. This could have been James Harden and Chris Paul's first ever ring. But injury was part of why it didn't happen. Before we talk more about that 2018 year and that Western Conference Finals, let's go all the way back to the year 2012 when Chris Paul first got injured in the playoffs. 2012 was Chris Paul and Lob City's first year together, so the offense was not in sync. There were some apparent holes in their game, and so this team was not prepared to go deep in the playoffs. In round 1, they beat the Memphis Grizzlies in 7 games, but in round 2, they do fall in a sweep to the San Antonio Spurs. Even though I would consider this a successful playoff run for the Clippers in their first year, Blake Griffin sprained his left knee, Chris Paul had a groin injury, and to make it worse, Caron Butler broke his hand. So this year wasn't the best when it came to the playoffs for the Clippers, but they're just getting started, and to all the NBA fans, Lob City is going to be a threat in the future and had a chance to win some rings together. Another thing to mention, 2012 was the first year of the Chris Paul playoff injury bug, and this is where the whole video and the whole curse starts. The next year in 2013, Blake Griffin suffers a high ankle sprain, and the Clippers lose to the Grizzlies in 6. Chris Paul didn't get injured, but this is another Blake Griffin injury in the playoffs. This was also big for Lob City, and things were going downhill, but they still had a lot of time. 2014, surprisingly, there were no injuries. They defeated the Warriors in the first round in 7 games, but then lost to OKC in 6 games. This is one of the years where the Clippers really had a chance and they blew it. A lot of crucial turnovers and bad calls in Game 5 of the OKC series, but 2014 was one of the best years for the Clippers at winning their championship. In 2015, the Clippers beat the Spurs in the first round in 7 games. Then Chris Paul gets a hamstring injury in the second round against Houston. Although the Clippers blew a 3-1 lead, there's no excuse to blowing a 3-1 lead here. But the 2015 Clippers were nowhere as deep as the 2014 Clippers, and there was no question whether they could have beat the Warriors or not. Most likely the Warriors would have won that series if they had advanced to the conference finals. Alright, now we hit to the 2016 playoffs. In the first round, the Clippers lose to the Trailblazers 4-2, and Chris Paul broke his third metacarpal and his hand gets stuck in a jersey. Blake Griffin re-injures his quad. Both players missed the rest of the playoffs from Game 4. So this definitely actually could have been the year. The Clippers got the opponent they wanted in the Blazers, and luck was actually on the Clippers side, but fate decided to get in the way, and Chris Paul and Blake Griffin both were gone in one game. After that, the series is pretty much over, and the Clippers have one more year together. Let's go to 2017. This is 4 injuries in 6 years for Chris Paul, so there's a little trend going on for sure. In 2017, the last year of the Lob City together. In 2018, remember, Chris Paul gets traded to the Rockets, all of that. But yeah, in 2017, the Clippers lose to Utah in 7 games after Blake Griffin suffers a toe injury in Game 3 and is out for the rest of the series. So this is just tough if you're a Clippers fan, right? I mean, this offseason you're going to go trade Chris Paul, but Blake Griffin and or Chris Paul have been consistently getting injured in the playoffs, as well as some small role players, but this is some really bad stuff. If they were not injured like the Clippers, they could have been really good in the playoffs, and they just always ended up having bad luck, bad fate, you know what I'm saying? So the Clippers, that's the end of their reign of terror, but this video isn't about the Lob City Clippers. It's about Chris Paul. So now, let's dive in to the Rockets era. On June 28th, 2017, the Clippers traded franchise point guard Chris Paul to the Houston Rockets for Pat Bev, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and Sam Dekker, along with a first-round pick in the 2018 draft. Less than a week later, the Rockets signed veteran defender PJ Tucker, who was actually a close friend of Paul. From there on, the 2017-2018 was the most dominant in Houston Rockets franchise history. The Rockets, 65-15 in the regular season, had their best ever record, with no other team in the league even reaching 60 wins that year. At 32-year-old, Chris Paul averaged 18 points on 46 from the field, 38 from the line, and 8 assists per game as Harden's sidekick, and the chemistry and on-court fit of the 2 superstar guards was tremendous. They won their first 2 playoff series by 4-1 margins and took a 3-2 lead in the Western Conference Final over defending NBA champions Golden State, only to lose Chris Paul in the final minute of Game 5 to a hamstring pull. Without Chris Paul, the Warriors rallied to win that series and another title. Now let's talk about why and how this all worked, because this was probably Chris Paul's closest, it is his closest ever chance at a championship as far as we know today. The Rockets were tied to, they end up winning that game, so they're going up 3-2 without Chris Paul. Let's say they have Chris Paul, they close out one of the last 2 games, they go to the championship, and guess who they play in 2018? One of the worst finals teams of all time, the 2018 Cleveland Cavaliers, with LeBron James and a bunch of veterans and aging players who he just led and carried like crazy to the finals and end up losing to the Warriors. Like, the Rockets were a 65-win team and they were just this close to beating the Warriors. So no doubt about it that Chris Paul, James Harden, and the rest of the Rockets could have easily blew the Cavs out of the water just like the Warriors were going to. So that's why this is crucial. If Chris Paul never gets injured here, he has so much history of injuries in the playoffs. If he never gets injured here, the Warriors won't rally to win the series, and they won't get another title. Chris Paul gets his title. James Harden gets his title. James Harden most likely doesn't go to Brooklyn. Chris Paul doesn't get traded because he won't get worse because of an injury. Westbrook never goes. Westbrook stays in OKC. The Paul George trade never happens. Kawhi would never leave Toronto. Like, this that one injury, like, you know how much that affected the entire NBA? Like, that's some crazy deep level stuff, if you know what I'm saying. Alright, so the main point is the Warriors won because of the Chris Paul's injury, and that would be as close as Chris Paul would get. But we still have one more year in Houston where Chris Paul isn't as good, obviously because of the injury. He's aging. So at the end of the year, in that offseason, he gets traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Russell Westbrook, and he gets traded with a bunch of picks. Initially, NBA fans were thinking OKC was like in a tank. They weren't going to do good. They're most likely going to trade him by the All-Star break. But from the Paul George trade, they get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then that forms a nice duo of Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, along with Dennis Schroeder, Steven Adams, and a couple of others, to actually make an OKC reach the playoffs and play the Houston Rockets in the first round. Now the Rockets end up winning that game in a close Game 7, and Lou Dort went crazy. Shout out Lou Dort. But that was the end of Chris Paul's tenure in OKC. That was a great first year. Like, as a veteran, he came in, led that team to the playoffs, and they almost ended up getting out with a first round win. But yeah, ultimately they ended up losing the first round, like I said. So this offseason, there were some rumors Chris Paul might get traded. Suns were a team. There were a bunch of other teams that were looking to trade, but Suns were kind of predominant, and so there was no real favorite. And then the Suns rumors died down for a couple of days. I vividly remember this. And then suddenly it's announced Chris Paul is traded for Kelly Oubre and a couple other people. But yeah, he's traded to the Phoenix Suns. So now they have this big three of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton. You saw what Chris Paul did with the Thunder last year and some young really good NBA players. All they needed is a good veteran point guard to lead them, and they made the playoffs with the Thunder. So the Suns, like, some people were writing the Suns off already, but the Suns legitimately had a chance to be top seed in the West because now they have Chris Paul with a scorer Devin Booker, a great interior finisher in Ayton, and Chris Paul to Ayton was like the second most assisted duo in the league. So that just shows you what Chris Paul can do with DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker. And so pair that alongside a good group of young players. This Suns team did not disappoint. They were very close to being the 1 seed. In the end, they were the 2 seed. But now, being the 2 seed means they have to go through something called the play-in. They don't have to go through the play-in. They play the winner of the first play-in game. That was Warriors-Lakers. LeBron versus Curry. Prime time matchup. You know what I'm saying? In the end, LeBron says he sees 3 rims, chucks up a 3, he goes in. So, now, guess what? Chris Paul, for the first time ever, is playing his friend LeBron James. Phoenix versus LA. While Phoenix is the 2 seed, everybody says, like most people are writing off Phoenix. Oh, LA has 2 superstars. Phoenix won't be able to defend Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Aiden's gonna get destroyed by Anthony Davis. And then, Game 1 happened.
Horton Tucker takes it to the rack, and a nice follow by LeBron James, who's now got 10 points.
And Chris Paul is down in pain.
Oh boy, holding his right shoulder by his neck. Paul writhing in pain. We're going to take a short break and come right back. Paul of the Suns shaken up on this play. A blow right there by Well, a little friendly fire, it appeared. Cam Johnson. Watch Cam Johnson to the left come in and right there graze Chris Paul, and he immediately grabs that upper right portion of his neck and trapezius muscle area right there. And a moment ago, he was helped off the court. Players from both teams gathering around the highly respected veteran. And LeBron James, one of his best friends in the game, helping him up.
Chris Paul goes down with a shoulder injury, and things are not looking good. People remember his previous injuries, and they're thinking, is this the last chance Chris Paul can win a championship? Because his career is winding down, he's getting older, so there's not much of a window left, and this year seemed like the perfect year until he got unlucky by drawing LeBron in the first round, and even unluckier by getting injured in Game 1 with a shoulder issue. Now he comes back, so the fans are happy, but there's one thing. Game 3 has already happened, so the Lakers have a 2-1 lead at the time of this recording. And I'll tell you something, Chris Paul does not look like the Chris Paul we all know and love. Like, I'm gonna put up a graphic on the screen right now about his stats during the regular season and his stats after the during the playoffs and after the injury. Like, he's just not been himself. Obviously, injury negatively impacts a player. Like, they're not the same type of player. And if Chris Paul isn't going to be the Chris Paul we all know, it's going to be hard for the Phoenix Suns to come out of this series. But yeah, he hasn't been great after the injury. I'm not blaming him or anything. It's just that the injury happened and he just hasn't been the same. So far in the playoffs, he's been averaging 7 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds. Way worse to his 2021 season stats of 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 9 assists. And he just hasn't had the same impact like I said before. So how does this affect his career chances at winning a championship? Obviously, if he can't be the player he is and the impact isn't going to be there, going up against, like what many people predicted, the 2 big stars in LA, it's going to be tough for Chris Paul, and this is where it's just a sad ending to a great career of basketball. And no, I'm not saying Chris Paul isn't going to win a championship. Just the signs are pointing towards the answer no. I mean, if Chris Paul wins a championship, I'll be happier than ever for Chris Paul, and that's just going to be a really cool moment. But like I said, the signs are pointing towards no, and the curse of Chris Paul is a terrible curse that he gets injured in the playoffs. Blake Griffin gets injured in the playoffs, so the Lob City Clippers never got far. Game 5 against Warriors, he gets injured. That's also terrible. The Rockets would have won the championship if he didn't get injured. And now the Suns had a chance of beating the Lakers and advancing towards a relatively easier path towards the championship without a healthy Chris Paul, obviously. And if they win, they face the winner of the Mavericks and Clippers series, and going up against the Mavericks will be good for the Suns, because let's say the Mavericks win, they don't have to face a team with multiple stars. Same thing with the Clippers, like they have 3 stars compared to the Clippers and Mavericks who only have 2 stars and other role players. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is the path for the Suns championship would have been easier if Chris Paul had been at full health. But this is just, like I said, a sad ending to a great NBA career, and he's going to go down as one of the greats at the point guard position, or just one of the greats of all time. But Chris Paul, the curse in the playoffs is terrible, and hopefully he's good, he's healthy, and I want to see Chris Paul do amazing things. So that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you, and tell me if you guys enjoyed it. This isn't me hating on Chris Paul. I just wanted to make this video about how he always gets injured in the playoffs, kind of in like a mini movie type format. But thank you guys anyways for watching. It's been English Daily. Make sure you guys hit that like button, and yeah, bye.